In part 13 of our Resident Evil recap, we covered the dramatic events of RE5. But before we subject ourselves to the monstrosity that is Resident Evil 6, here in part 14 of our full series recap, we're going to talk about the game that serves as a bridge to it, Resident Evil Revelations 2, which also serves as a follow-up to RE5 and of course the first Revelations. Now, before we begin, this video is based on our understanding of Resident Evil Revelations 2's story and lore, and reflects our interpretation of its events as a refresher before Resident Evil Requiem. As always, we recommend that you make your own informed call by looking into the game yourself and ensuring that it matches your expectations, standards, and personal values. And also, just as a heads up before we dive in, this is a newly edited, expanded, and restructured version of our earlier recap, now presented in 4K at 60 FPS. This entire recap series also includes coverage of Outbreak, Outbreak File Number 2, Umbrella Chronicles, and Darkside Chronicles, entries that we did not include the first time around. So with that out of the way, let's get started. The setting. Revelations 2 is set in the year 2011, a couple of years after the events of Resident Evil 5 and the death of Albert Wesker, and features two primary playable protagonists, Claire Redfield, who returns for her third outing after RE2 and Code Veronica, and longtime fan favorite Barry Burton, Chris and Jill's former star's comrade who steps into the limelight as a playable character for the first time in a Resident Evil game. Resident Evil Revelations 2 splits its story across 4 chapters, with Claire and Barry sharing the stage, though the latter's part of the story is set about 6 months after Claire's. For the purposes of this recap, however, we're going to be going over the game's events in chronological order and not in the time-jumping manner that the game presents them in. So with that said, let's dive right in. Resident Evil Revelations 2 opens with Claire Redfield, now working for the anti-bioterror organization, TerraSave, attending a TerraSave event with her new partner, Moira Burton, the daughter of Barry Burton. Compared to the experienced Claire, Moira seems inexperienced and unsure, but she carries a heavy past. Years earlier, she and her sister Polly discovered one of their father's guns, and while handling it carelessly, Moira accidentally shot and seriously injured her sister. Barry initially blamed Moira for the event, creating deep tension between them, though he later accepted that the real fault was his for allowing the weapon to even be accessible. Even so, the trauma never left Moira, and in the present day she lives with a deep fear of firearms. The TerraSave gathering that Claire and Moira are attending as Revelations 2 kicks off is interrupted by an abrupt and unexpected attack. Armed and masked soldiers come crashing in and quickly proceed to knock out those in attendance and take them away as captives. When Claire and Moira come to, they realize that they're in an abandoned, decrepit prison on an island. And that's far from the end of their predicament. The prison you see is also crawling with terrifying creatures known as the afflicted, once regular humans who, under the pressure of extreme torture over time, have completely broken and mutated. The nightmare begins. When Claire and Moira come to, they discover strange bracelets locked around their wrists. The devices allow them to communicate, but they also serve a far more disturbing function. A woman calling herself the Overseer contacts them through the bracelets and calmly explains that the prison they are trapped in is under her control. The bracelets, she reveals, monitor and record their fear. The reason becomes clear later. After fighting their way through the prison and eventually reaching an abandoned settlement, Claire and Moira learn the truth. They're not random captives, but deliberate test subjects. The Overseer is developing a new bioweapon known as the T-Phobos virus, a strain that reacts to fear. Once an inflicted person reaches a critical emotional threshold, the virus triggers, transforming them into a mutated creature. They've barely had time to process it when they link up with their co-workers, Gabriel Chavez and Pedro Fernandez. Gabe spots a busted helicopter and drags Claire over. His plan is simple. Fix it, fly out, survive. Well, it doesn't last. Around this point, the group is attacked by the afflicted, and Pedro, unable to keep his fear in check, mutates into a monster. They fight off against Pedro until the TerraSave's leader, Neil Fisher, arrives to help them escape. Not long afterward, they cross paths with another mysterious figure, a young girl named Natalia, an orphan who lost her parents in the Terra Grigia panic years ago, who thanks to the many traumas she has been through is now effectively immune to fear. At the same time, Gabe finally gets the helicopter running and makes a break for it, only for the Overseer to take control from afar. She cripples the flight systems mid-escape and Gabe is killed in the crash. Claire's meeting with the young girl is cut short due to the crash, however, because she is soon abducted by a hooded figure who takes her back to the Overseer. And what does the Overseer want with her? Well, she wants to transfer her mind and consciousness into Natalia, effectively rendering herself immortal. And it's at this point that Resident Evil Revelations 2 starts doling out answers for the many mysteries that it's built up. The Revelations. As Claire and Moira pursue Natalia and the person who took her, the bigger picture starts coming into focus. The Overseer is revealed to be Alex Wesker, tied directly to the same Project Wesker that produced Albert. He was the most infamous result, but not the only one. Alex, raised and shaped by that program, went on to become an Umbrella researcher, and she has been continuing her work in the shadows ever since. They also learn that she's not operating alone. Neil Fisher, a former FBC operative, has aligned himself with her. After the FBC was dissolved when Morgan Lansdale's connection to the Terra Grigia panic came to light, Fisher became obsessed with rebuilding the organization and putting himself at the center of it. His partnership with Alex is transactional. He helps advance her experiments, and in return, he wants a sample of Ouroboros, believing it can be the leverage he needs to resurrect the FBC and turn it into something even more formidable. But Alex Wesker is a Wesker after all, and that's something that Fisher has clearly failed to consider. Alex betrays him, and as soon as Fisher, who is the hooded figure that abducted Natalia, hands the little girl over to Alex, rather than handing him an Ouroboros sample, Alex injects him with the virus and flees from the scene. Fisher reacts to Ouroboros instantly and is turned into a monster that Claire and Moira are then forced to deal with. The fight culminates in Moira finally getting over her fear of guns and killing Fisher for good. Claire and Moira are not out of danger yet. They track Alex down, only to find that she has Natalia in her grasp. When they finally confront her, Alex lays out the endgame. She intends to overwrite Natalia with her own consciousness, using the girl as a vessel to cheat fear and even death itself. Then, without warning, Alex raises her gun and shoots herself in the head. By every visible measure, she is dead. Alex's death sets the facility into lockdown and triggers a self-destruct sequence, forcing Claire and Moira to sprint for their lives. They almost make it out together, but the escape collapses at the worst possible moment. Moira is pinned beneath falling debris and cannot free herself. She begs Claire to go, and Claire, with no other choice, dives into the ocean and barely survives. When she wakes up, Claire is in a hospital, and Barry Burton is there waiting. She breaks the news that Moira did not make it, but Barry, devastated, cannot bring himself to accept it. 6 months later. Here we're going to move on to Barry Burton's side of the story, which is set half of a year after the events that we just recounted. Looking for his daughter, Barry arrives on the island where she and Claire were trapped 6 months ago, and it's not long afterward that he too crosses paths with Natalia. But before this meeting, there are some important details that you need to know. Just before Barry reaches her, Natalia slips into a dreamlike sequence and sees Lottie, her favorite teddy bear. When Lottie vanishes, she searches the island, now crawling with danger but guided by Dark Natalia, a manifestation of Alex's mind that can sense nearby monsters and help her sneak through them. She eventually reaches the seashore, where Dark Natalia tries to take over Natalia's body, warning she'll be overwritten eventually. Natalia awakens from her as Barry's boat approaches the island. Barry, not wanting to leave the little girl on her own in such a hostile place, decides to look after her and travel with her. The two brave all manner of obstacles and dangers as they trek through the island, and also make a rather unsurprising discovery that Alex Wesker isn't dead after all, and thanks to the T-Phobos virus has transformed her into a monster. Encounter against Alex. Barry and Natalia's journey culminates, as you'd expect, in a final confrontation with Alex Wesker, which can go one of multiple ways, but for the purposes of this recap, we're going to focus only on the canon path. Alex injects herself with Ouroboros, living up to her name, and mutates even further. As the fight proceeds, the mutated Alex proves to be too much for Barry to handle, which is saying a lot. But just when it seems like he's going to get beaten and Natalia is going to go back into Alex's crutches, Moira arrives on the scene. Yes, she is still alive and has been surviving on the island for the past 6 months. But how did she survive? During the 6 months between Claire's escape and Barry's arrival, Moira survives alongside Evgeny Rebek, an elderly Russian who saved her when the tower was destroyed. They would often clash against each other, but after finding a letter from Evgeny's daughter and learning her fate, he gives up and gives in to his illness and urging Moira to leave, so she pushes on and makes it in time to save Barry and Natalia from Alex. With Moira's help, Barry and Natalia are able to fight off Alex, with the three of them making a run for it right afterwards. Alex refuses to stay down. She mutates again and hunts them through the ruins, forcing Barry, Moira, and Natalia in a desperate final push for survival. Help arrives at the last moment when Claire returns to the island in a helicopter and covers them from above with a sniper rifle, buying them the seconds that they need to reach the extraction point. As the three scramble aboard, Alex makes one last charge in her fully transformed state. Claire answers it with an RPG shot that obliterates her for good, a deliberate echo of the moment years earlier when Claire's brother Chris ended Albert Wesker the same way with a final rocket. In the epilogue, Claire heads to Barry's place and learns her brother Chris Redfield is in China to fight off against the C virus, something we're going to tackle in RE6. Without missing a beat, she says, "Tell Piers to keep an eye on him." But Weskers will always be Weskers, and it seems like Alex hasn't been fully dealt with yet. Resident Evil Revelation 2's epilogue reveals that Barry has adopted Natalia and is now raising her as his daughter, though it also turns out that Alex Wesker's plan of transferring her consciousness into Natalia may have worked after all, with the woman's mind seemingly beginning to overtake the young girl's. Well, for now, that's the last that we see of Alex Wesker and Natalia, and we don't really know how long it'll be before the developer chooses to follow up on that story. There is still plenty more to talk about where the larger Resident Evil plotline is concerned, however, because when we return for part 15 of our series' recap, we're going to be talking about the messy, convoluted events of Resident Evil 6.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.